So if you need to, you can pause and rewind the video to get back to parts. I just don't want to make the video unnecessarily long. So today we are practicing Photoshop and some basic skills inside of Photoshop that you would need not only for the certification exam, but also just if you're doing projects on your own. So to make this more realistic, we're actually going to go ahead and make 2 social media posts for me. I finished a pattern over the weekend, so we're going to use that pattern to create some social media posts for my Instagram stories. So that's the plan, and we're going to do it in Photoshop, which is not my favorite program to use for this kind of stuff, but it is really easy, and there are some cool tools that we have in here that we do not see in other programs. So let's get started. First, you should have downloaded the asset folder. So anytime we start a project, we start with creating an asset folder that's going to have anything in it that I need to complete the project. That way too, if I have to recreate it, or if a couple months from now, if I want to do something similar, I have all my stuff at my ready because I have kept it together inside the asset folder. So here is my asset folder. I shared this with you guys. You can see I included a couple different things, and you can also see how I name things. So like this is lazily named, which means that it did not get named at all. It's whatever was stock. But for the most part, I tried to name it with the name of the file plus like what is it for. So like this one's for my Instagram post. So it's here and it's a square, which obviously we know Instagram prefers. And then there's also this one, which is long and skinny, which I'm also going to be using for social. So I label them that way. There's also this crinkle paper I put in here for texture, so I just thought it'd be a fun little addition for us to play around with. So I can show you guys how to use texture as well, because texture is so fun. So we're going to start by opening up Photoshop. I'm currently working in 2020, depending on the version and your workspace or anything else, it may look different than mine. You may also want to take notes as I introduce different concepts, because we're doing this so you can learn the different parts of Photoshop, not so that way we can make something. That's just the added bonus. So if you get to a part where you're like, oh, I didn't know that before, please write it down so you are better able to use Photoshop in the future. So the first thing that you can do is go into Window, go to Workspace, and see what your workspace is. So default should be Essentials. There's other ones, Motion, Painting, Photography, Graphic and Web. We're going to stick with Essentials, but if you feel like yours looks funny, you can always click this Reset Essentials, and it'll take you back to the preset for the Essential workspace. And your workspace is just basically everything. Your panels on the left, your panels on the right. We don't need that right now. Learn can be removed. Notice how easy it is to adjust your panels to do whatever it is you need for them to do. I don't need another panel. I can add my libraries right here and keep everything nice and organized. So we are ready to get started. I just need to go ahead and create a file. So to do that, I'm going to go to File, New. Now, depending on whether or not you were open already or if you just opened for the first time, this may look different. But essentially, you're just trying to find the place that tells you to open a new file. All right, so we are going to be creating for the web today. There are some options on here for presets and templates. So fun. Some of these are free. Some of these cost money. It just depends. There's a lot on Adobe stock for professional artists to use. But for right now, we're just going to go ahead and use our own measurements. So what's nice is it lets you kind of pick everything here, so you're setting up your full file from the right-hand panel. We're going to name this Social Media Post 1 Paradise. That's going to go ahead with the pattern that I designed, but also with the fact that it's the first post I'm going to be doing. So, yeah. Resolution is at 72 right now. So as far as resolution goes, we're looking at pixel. That's going to be too low. We are going to want to see something closer to 150 for social media, or 300 if we plan on doing anything bigger than a cell phone. So I'm going to go ahead and make mine high resolution just because I want to. But it's completely up to you. If you want to do the 150 or the 300, it's the larger file, the bigger you go. Now, I looked up the measurements for an Instagram story, and it's going to be 1080 pixel width by a 1920 height. We are in pixels, so this is where you guys would be picking your measurement. Pixels would be for screen, inches would be for print, centimeters or millimeters would also be for print. Points, I've never really used points, but picas are a publication term that is used really only in print publications. It's a unit of measurement that is exclusively for print. It's kind of dated, but it does exist, and we still use it sometimes, like in the creation of the yearbook. Now we get to make some other choices. Now RGB is the color we're going to use because RGB is actually the preset color mode for screens. So RGB is additive color. It means that you're adding different lights together. So you add them all the way until you get white, and then you take them all the way to get black. Whereas CMYK is subtractive color. So it's not made the same way. And so making sure you have the correct color mode ensures that your colors are going to show up the way you want them to. There's already so much variety within the way that screens show things. So if you're not doing this, it could be an issue. So RGB color is what we want. And then we can choose background color. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing today, but sometimes it's nice to have a transparent. And we talk about transparency later. So we're going to go with white today because it doesn't really matter. Color profile. We can basically decide anything. We can say don't color manage, and we can manage it ourselves, or we can go ahead and set a preset. Working RGB would be fine for this. Everything looks good. We are ready to go. Notice that we also have orientation here, so that's going to be if we're doing it portrait or a landscape. All right, so now we have an artboard in Photoshop, and we are ready to go. This is our social media post. So this is what the screen will be looking like for Instagram. So now to begin. I'm just going to walk you guys through some things that appear once you have a board started. So first, our properties now exist. We have layers existing. We're ready to begin applying things. Now, I know what I'm doing for this. We're going to be doing some clipping mask stuff just because it's kind of fun and it's an important skill for you guys for certification. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in over here, File, and we're going to place Embedded. Okay, we're going to look on my computer because your asset folder is on your computer, and then you're going to navigate to that folder. So here we are. Now, for this one, we're going to start with the Hawaiian Gold Social Long. Okay, we're going to place that in. We do want to make sure that it covers the whole thing. So I'm going to use my corners to stretch it. All right, its priority is just to get it to fit. I want it to stretch. All right, so now it's in, and we have our image started. We have our first layer. So there's lots of things I can do from here, but I kind of know what I want to do. I didn't really want that to be my only layer. So I'm going to come over here to my layers panel, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to drag it underneath my Gold Social. So this one is now layer 1, Gold Social Long is layer 2. I am also going to duplicate this layer. So my gold is going to be duplicated again. So I have 3 layers now. I have layer 1, Hawaiian Gold Social Long, and long copy. All right, in layer 1, we're going to be revealing this background, so I want to go ahead and choose what color I want this to be. And I'm thinking that black might be a really pretty color to do this on. I do have a swatch for this, not here, here. Okay, so this is the color I want. So if you come over to this left-hand side, let's go ahead and start by getting our paint bucket. So here's your paint bucket. It's smart. It does a great job. It does some really fun stuff. So if you're ever trying to recolor something, your paint bucket does a lot. And then we wanted to select the color. So I always just double click in here to make sure it knows I'm communicating the color. And then I would select the one from my library. Now you guys don't have this option because you guys don't have a library that's started right now. So instead we're going to use this number right here, which is generally referred to as a hex code. So I'm going to double click the black again to show you guys how to fix this. So here we have this number, and we're going to make it match this one. All right, and we're going to hit OK, and we're going to come in here and notice and watch the space because I'm clicked here. I'm ready to go. Watch that space as I click. See, it turned black. So now it has the black shade that I want, and I'm ready to begin. Now, the second thing I wanted to do was to add I want to give myself space to add type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this very, very top one, and I'm going to cut out something from it. So you have to choose like how you want to cut something out. There's a lot of different ways. There's these tools here, which is like a lasso, which you just click and drag and around your shape. Polygonal lasso, which uses lines instead of circular motion, so it can give you really clean lines. And then the magnetic lasso, which uses smart technology to try to find the edge. All three of them are great for different reasons. There's also just shapes. And so today, since I know what we're doing, I'm going to use a shape. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to drag and drop. Okay? Now, what I really want is there to be like this cutout. So I'm going to hit delete. Ooh. Not directly editable. Why is this happening? This is a smart object. Okay, rasterize. Let's see if that does anything. Okay, it did. So you can see on the right-hand side how now that box exists. Now, since I have two of these layers, you're not really seeing that full effect, but you can if I go ahead and turn off the eye. All right, it did make me rasterize that because it was a smart object, so you may have to do that for both layers. I'm not quite sure. We'll see when we get there. All right, I'm done with my box, so I can go ahead and click deselect. And now I am ready to move to the next part. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to click layer 1 and hit the plus sign for new layer. What I want to do is create a layer that is going to have the pattern in it, but it's going to be in the space that's right here. So I'm going to come over here to type, and I'm going to draw myself a text box. Right, and this is where you guys get to pick your own fonts and stuff. I don't care what you pick. I have so many fonts on my computer that you guys would never have, so I don't expect yours to look the same. Now I want my type to be white. Come up here all the way to white. Okay. There's definitely some funky stuff going on, so this is a good opportunity for me to show you guys some different tools. So we want to be able to see in the properties the character panel. If ever you can't find something, you always go to window, and you can also find the character panel on its own. But properties does a lot of stuff, and it's smart, and it does try to pick up on what you're doing. Now here's my font size, and here's my leading. That's the space between lines. And it is way bigger. We definitely don't want it that large. So that's one of the funky things that was happening. The space between is at 200, which sometimes you can do that for effect, but that seems extreme right now. I'm going to bring it down to 50. All right, the color is correct. Let's see if there's anything else we want to change. I do want it to the left-hand side of my paragraph, so that is good to go. Now you guys can pick any font, and you can make it look however you want, but our message needs to say, new pattern available on Spoonflower. Now, notice it's getting cut off. I have to come in here now, and I need to make it smaller. So I'm going to try 34. Yeah, that works perfect. Awesome. Now, this is cool, but I think let's make it cooler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn back on this layer I made invisible because it was bothering me. And I'm going to control click it or right click it. And I'm going to click create clipping mask. What it's doing is it's creating a mask with the layer underneath it, and which is that type layer, and making it the same. So right now, this is the actual pattern in the actual spot showing through, which is so neat. And this is a fun little graphic that looks super professional, but really only takes a few minutes to put together. So this is our first social media post. Now we're going to look at how we would export it. So there's a couple different things to note. Now if I wanted to, I could come in and find a layer that is like, oh, I really like this layer, I want to save it. And you could hit layer, and you can do, where is it at? Export as. So you can actually export the layer all by itself and not have to worry about, because of the text, any of the other text. So I could save this and put this somewhere else and use it in another, file I'm working on at a later time. So that's an option. So to do that, we click the layer, we go to the layer panel. Since these two layers are linked right now, they're going to show up that way. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File and Export. Now notice we have several options here. Just click Export as PNG. Now PNG files are great if you need transparency. So if there's a part of your image that would be showing transparency and you want it to have that, effect of having no background, you're going to need to export it as a PNG. But you can export it in other ways as well. So PNG is going to be one of the only files that will show that transparency. So since this is not a transparent file, we're going to go with a JPEG. And the reason for that is JPEGs are smaller than PNG files. And so since we're working with the internet, we want to make sure that we are being conscientious of our file size. Okay, And that would be it. So JPEG, everything else looks good. Export. You get to choose where you want to export it to, and then you would hit save. So I'll just put mine on my desktop. For some reason, it's not exporting the file name, so we're going to want to make sure that we change that. Social media post 1 paradise. Right, and that's how you export a JPEG file. Now, the next thing you're going to want to know is, how do I save this thing as a Photoshop file? There's a couple different reasons why you'd want to do this. The first would be, you want to be able to edit it. So if I want to come back in and mess with these layers and move things around, I have to save it as a Photoshop file. So that would be number one reason why. The second would be, I'm not done yet. I'm still working on things and I'm not sure if it's going to be 100% ready yet. So we would save it as a Photoshop file so we can still come in and finalize changes. Once you make it a JPEG, that JPEG file can't have the text moved around anymore. It can't be as easily manipulated as the layers are within Photoshop. So we would go ahead and save the Photoshop file, and you're ready to go. Another thing that came up a lot when I was doing the test was that there is, let's see, I don't know if I can find it right now. Is it file info? File info. This was something that I had to do on the test, and I remember having to do it, and it's something to think about. So if it asks you to save things like a document title, an author, a description, a rating, keywords, any of those things, you're going to be looking in this area. This is also where you're going to be able to establish that something is copyrighted. Copyright is inherent. So the second I created this pattern, it existed. So that is mine. You guys can't use it for money. Nobody can use it for money without my permission or without purchasing the rights from me. So I could come in and say, how do you do it? I can't remember now. I think it's something like that. And then you would do like Courtney Hanks, 2021. And you can also add things in like contact and give your information if you want people to have that information to be able to purchase your work. But this is metadata, so this will attach itself to this image, and it will make it a smarter image, which is really, really helpful for websites. So if you are bringing your photography into a website to use and you want people to be able to find it, this is what a lot of this is. So just something that I know I had to do on my exam when I took it, and that will come up again. Any of this information can be found here and added to your file, and it will save with it. So that was underneath File Info under File. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start our next one. So File New. All right, we do not need to change this stuff because, yay, it saved everything for us. So we're going to go ahead and instead, preset details, we're going to name it Social. All right, we don't need everything all caps. Social Media Post 2 Paradise. All right, so this would be the second version. So it's not going to be anything too crazy. It's going to be pretty similar to the first, but we're going to get a little bit more crafty with what we're taking in. So I'm not going to use a background layer this time, and we are going to go ahead and place the exact image. So we're going to start with our crinkle paper. So place. And notice we have this no and this check up here. While we're doing this, it's asking us, hey, do you like what's happening with this file before we make this permanent? And so make sure you have your file the way you want it before you check off, because it'll go ahead and close the tool on us. So I am adjusting it using the corners to get to the size I want for my post. And then I will hit the check mark that I'm finished. And this is just going to add some texture to our image. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and bring in my pattern. So we're doing this for a different pattern this time. So we're going to do place embedded. And we are going to do Paradise Found Insta. This is a darker one, and I kind of want like almost a Polaroid effect. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of make it smaller so it lines up correctly and has some space around. I want it to have a little buffer. Okay, check. Okay, so it's here. I've got my image in, I've got space for myself to write something, and I've got the crinkle paper background. There is something I need to teach you guys, so I'm going to go ahead and do it now. This is how it interacts with the stuff on the page. So when you choose a layer, you can choose these, I can't remember what they're called, blending modes, that's what they're called. All right, so you can choose a blending mode. So you can notice that there's subtle changes being made as it goes. What's will actually replicate the texture that's underneath it in the image. So especially when you're working with texture, playing around with these and seeing if it, works for you can be really cool. We're not going to go ahead and use one right now because we don't need to. The other thing is opacity, but we're going to go ahead and talk about that in just 1 minute. And the next thing is, let's go back to crinkle paper and let's use an adjustments layer. So adjustments layers are layers that are non-destructive. So they add a layer on top of it that edits the file underneath it rather than creating a completely, a whole edit to the photograph itself. It's the difference between cutting a paper with scissors and sticking a piece of, transparent paper on top of it to see it. So one would hurt it, one doesn't hurt it. So that's non-destructive versus destructive editing. So since this is non-destructive, we're going to go ahead and use this method. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to tint this page from white to a little bit darker of a gray. So we're going to do solid color. I'm going to come in and select just a group blackish color and hit OK. Now here I can come in and I can change the opacity. So I can bring it down to 20% and I can change its mode to multiply. Alright, so doing that just it kept the texture of the paper behind it, but it made it a little bit darker. We could do that in another way too. So if we really wanted it to be lighter instead of darker, we could do that. We could make it a funky color. So maybe we wanted it to have more of like the gold that was in there in the original. Alright, so we could do that as well. Kind of almost a vintagey effect. So that is an adjustments layer. Whenever anything ever asks you to make adjustments, that's where it's located. There's also this little masking area you can do for masking, which is not what we're doing right now. But it's good to know where it's at because you may be asked. If you guys ever make a mistake while you're working, Command Z is your undo, or Control Z, I think, if you're on a PC. Alright, so we have our image ready. We have this here. We're ready now to go ahead and add some type. So we go back to our type tool on this left-hand side, come in, and add our type box. So for this one, we're going to say, I'm going to adjust it because I want it to line up. New patterns available on Spoonflower. And what I can do is I can select all of this, come up here, and make global changes to it. I know that I want this to look more handwritten. Sorry. So I'm going to come in and find a font that looks more like a handwritten font, something that looks like I could actually have written it right on there, which I have bad handwriting, so I don't want to find one that's too perfect. That one's a little challenging to read. Let's see. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. I know I found one earlier. That one's not bad. Okay. So I found one. You can use whatever you want as you're following along, but that's the one I chose, which is Springfield Demo, which is definitely one that I downloaded from the internet. Coming up here to adjust the color of my font because it is definitely too light at white. And I'm going to go ahead and mess with the size of the font until I get it where I kind of want it. Now, I thought I was going to like it to the left, but I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and center it. Alright. One of the great things about this stuff is that you can change your mind as you work. Now, my L is kind of hitting my P, so we want to go back to that right-hand panel, find our characters area, and look back at that leading. See how it's 40 and this is 50? It's not adjusting on its own, so we want to go ahead and make sure that we are adjusting it manually. So that makes it have a little more space in between. Remember that between the fonts, sometimes you need your tracking adjusted, sometimes you need your leading adjusted, your font size adjusted, or between specific letters, your kerning. Alright, and that would be if I don't like how this E is so far away from this N, I could come in to the kerning and I could move that slightly so that way it's closer together. And some fonts need that, some fonts don't, it just depends. Another thing to note is a lot of times with these scripty fonts, they're meant to touch each other, so if your tracking is not at whatever it was supposed to be, it doesn't look like it's supposed to look, and you can see how that impacted the way the letters were looking. Alright, so that's a perfectly acceptable design on its own, but I may want to do something else. So just to kind of give it one more little piece of edge, I am going to go ahead and add in a piece of tape. So I already have one of these. We want to go ahead and place embedded. And when we say place embedded, we just mean that the file is actually going to sit inside this file rather than it be this separate thing that it's linked to. The downside is when a file is linked and you make changes to the file, it'll update. But if it's embedded, then it's actually in this file and it makes this file larger. So there's pros and cons to both, but generally if I'm not working with a ton of images inside of a file, then I'll embed them. I won't embed them if the file is too big. Yeah, if I'm worried about the size of the file. Okay, sorry, got a little confused with myself there. All right, and that is now a completely acceptable social media post. The one thing I would do, though, is I like my tape to look like real tape, and right now it doesn't look like it. So I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 90%, so I can see kind of through it like you would in real life. All right, and there's a very quick, little, easy project for my social media. The one thing there's a couple tools that I do want to make sure I go over with you before we finish today, so I am going to quickly do those. The first would be grouping. So I may want to actually manually group together maybe the files that are not the text. So maybe like all my graphics are going to be in one, and then I want my type in another. It's not that necessary when you're dealing with, a couple files, but sometimes you get into a larger image that you're working on for a while, and there's a lot of layers to it, and so grouping those layers can be easier to navigate. So all you're going to do is select them. So if you don't know how to do this, you can hold the Command key or the Shift key and select the ones you want. If you need to delete one, you could always hit, holding the Command key, click one of them. So all of those I want to go ahead and be in their own group. So I'm going to come in here and we're going to say New Group. This group is going to be called Graphics. Okay? And now all of them are in this group together. Now if I need to take one out, I just literally remove it and take it out. So and if I wanted to add this in, I could just literally move it into the group. They're not, set in stone at all. They're just a way to organize, especially when you have a lot. Sometimes, those did not add themselves. Okay, just kidding. There we go, now they're in. So that didn't work, so I had to drag and drop it afterwards. Let's see, maybe because I didn't do it from layers. So I clicked the wrong thing. I should have clicked new group from layers. Sorry. Learning as we go. Like I said, I don't really use Photoshop as often as I use InDesign, but it's good to know how to use because there's a lot of things that are only available in here. Definitely for things like the tape, that's real tape that I made. I scanned it in from my scanner, I made edits to it, and now it's a file that I can use at my discretion. So yeah, now you can see how by making a group, it can kind of clean up your artboard area or your layers panel and make it easier to navigate. Okay, I'm going to go through my notes real quick to make sure there's nothing else I really wanted to teach you. Okay, so brushes. I do use brushes, but you guys don't have the brushes I have, so you can't really follow along with this part. So for brushes, I actually use them more for erasing, but today we're going to use it for painting. Oh, they're all missing. Oh no! All of them aren't here. So usually I do have a ton of them, but we are in my new computer, and my new computer does not have any of my old brushes. But I might be able to find something in here I can use, just to show you. So your brushes are in here. You can come in, and I can make a new layer for my paint. And then I could do something like, using the black paint, I make the size much larger. And I can see my brush. I could take down the opacity so it's not so dramatic when it goes on. You also can set, it's like, what do we call this? I keep forgetting this. Like how what is it called? Oh, it's on the next page. Blending mode. Jeez, oh man, sorry. Blending mode. So this is how it blends with the background. So we could also decide how it does that. I just tend to like multiply better, so yeah. And that could just add a little bit of graphic into it. I have way more brushes usually, but that's what we use brushes for. Now, I also do a lot of my artwork on my iPad. this actually the artwork that we're working with today, I did on my iPad. So I actually have brushes that I paid for that I use to do editing. And I would also like to note that any brushes you have can also be used as a eraser. So sometimes it's really cool to come in with like a texture and take away instead of just adding color. So that's a cool thing to do in Photoshop. That's how we did all the grunge work in the 2020 yearbook, which had a very grungy, gritty theme. Ugh. So that's that. Now, if you need to edit a brush, you would go into Window, Brush Settings. Maybe this one, I don't like how much spacing is in it, so I want to change that, so you could adjust that here. The size of it, maybe I want it smaller. What's the automatic it's going to go to? Shape dynamics, things like jitter, things like angle jitter and tilt scale, which this is super advanced stuff. Like, I don't even make brushes, really. I just, I edit my brushes, but I don't make them. But you need to know where they're at, because sometimes it's nice to be able to come in, especially things like smoothing, adding that kind of stuff in, or protect texture, to make sure that your lines are coming out nice and crisp. But these brushes are used for very cool things that I don't ever use them for. I use it mostly for grunge work and texturizing in Photoshop, the application, but I do use them in other applications, like Illustrator for brushes. So they exist, they have a purpose, it's just different depending on what you're doing with it. Alright, that's brushes, where those are at. Let's see, what's next? I showed you guys how to use adjustments panel, the layers, brushes, where the properties are. Alright, remember that if you can't find anything that you need to find, so character refers to your type part. If you can't find anything that's talking about the characters, make sure you're on the character layer, and then also make sure that you have it open. Your property should pull everything open that you need, but if it's not what you need is necessary for you at that moment, then you're going to want to come in here and find it. Rulers and guides. If I want a ruler, I go to View, Rulers, and I can see where I'm at in my file. If I want guides, you can do a new guide. A lot of times people will place these in their designs as a way to kind of measure, and these can be moved around. So if I really wanted to make sure I had straight lines, I could add guides into my work that create almost a grid for me to include my work, everything nice and organized in alignment with each other. Now, we are working right now with pixels, so almost everything in Photoshop is pixel-based. There is this pen tool, which would allow you to create vector files. The difference between a vector image and a pixel image is that a pixel image, as it gets larger, becomes more pixelated because it's made out of tiny squares. A vector image, on the other hand, is made out of a mathematical equation, and then it fills that data in with color. So it's much more like computer looking for the most part, but it also allows you to blow up the image as big as you need to go. So right now we're working with pixels because we're not worried about it being really large, but a lot of times we're doing things like logos and even with pattern making, a lot of times you really do want to have vector illustration because it can be as big as you need it to be without having to worry about it being distorted and pixelated. If I wanted to change the color of anything in here, you want to go to Image Adjustments. This is where all of the colorizing stuff would be. So if I need to saturate it, if I need to mess with the hue or the levels on it, which levels are great for adding black and white into the image. These are great, but doing it here with an adjustments layer means that it's not damaging the image itself. So this is definitely a better area to do it rather than using the image adjustments. But that is where it's located in case you need it. And I didn't go into how to fix an area. I can show you guys that really quick. Alright, so the next thing I want to show you is if, let's say, I wanted to correct something. So ignore me right now because I'm going to do something that I don't want you guys to do. I'm merging all my layers into one. So now this is no longer editable. It's all together as one image. Now, let's say I wanted to get rid of this spot. I would come in my lasso tool, click, hold, lasso this area, and then go to, where is it at? Content Aware Fill. So I can come in and do this. It's going to do it automatically. It should be good on its own without having to hit anything else. Notice that it's gone. So I can hit OK, and it has, using math and science and all those things, it's gone in and fixed this little error for me. So this is great for things like when there's something in your image that you want to remove. There's also an easy way to do that with the patch tool. It works very similarly. So I can come in and then, I'm in the wrong layer. I'm like, what is it telling me? Make sure you're in the right layer. All right, and then I can literally drag and say, like, I want you to copy this spot, and it will heal that area. So all of these are great. There's a spot healing brush, the healing brush. Those are all great ways to get rid of things like pimples, but also things that are bad inside of images. And I think that's everything. I mean, that's the bulk of what you guys would ever need to know how to do in Photoshop. After that, it does get super complicated and complex, but those are the basic things that you would need to do to put a file together. So go ahead and save your files. So file, we are going to export as JPEGs if you haven't already. Both images, JPEG, export. The one thing I will ask you guys to do is when you name them and you save them. So like I would go ahead and do like social media post 1 Hanks. So include your last name. If it's a common last name, make sure you use a first initial as well. All right, and that will go ahead and export for me. You're going to want to do that for both of these.